Welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen's Call podcast with host Lane Nordland.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cattlemen's Call podcast. Lane Nordland joining you here today. And as we move through 2026, we're going to have a great conversation here today about partnerships out on the range and have a little discussion around conservation easements as well. We actually had a conservation easement conversation back in 2024 with Chad Ellis and Michael Delbar that was very popular with our viewers and our listeners. And we're going to kind of go around those same lines here today. We're joined by Erik Glenn. He's the CEO of the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust, but also the president of the Partnership for Rangeland Trust, or PORT. And also joining us from the Raptor 26 Ranch in Colorado is Lee Rooks. And we're going to jump into the topic of voluntary conservation easements, how they can be used by landowners as a tool, and what to consider and how that might fit your operations. But first off, gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, Lee. It was great meeting you yesterday, and you said you were a listener of the podcast, so
yes.
That makes two
yes.
people. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for doing this, and greatly look forward to this.
Yeah. Erik, how are things going on your end here today?
They are good. Lane, thanks for giving us the opportunity to come in and have this conversation.
Now, let's talk a little more. Erik, I'll start with you about PORT. What is PORT? Who makes up its membership and the role that it serves for folks out in the countryside?
Sure. So PORT is the Partnership of Rangeland Trusts. It was established in 2004, and it was really established to do a couple of things. One was to allow for these ag land conservation organizations that formed by the membership of some of the NCBA affiliates, particularly Colorado, who kind of pioneered this. And then coming after that was Wyoming and California, Oregon and Kansas, to be able to get together and trade ideas about how to do this work better. And what I mean by do the work better is, how do we better serve the producer? How do we design conservation easements in a way that works for that producer and their operation? So first and foremost, that was the idea behind get these groups together, let them try ideas. And it's kind of expanded. Now it's really focused on also helping to develop public policy. There's a lot of easement programs that exist out there in the Farm Bill and other programs. How do we design those programs to work better for that producer once again? And then the other thing that we want to do with PORT is continue to innovate. How do we build new programs that better support operational resiliency for our producers? We know that we need new tools. We need more tools for producers to continue to do the stewardship on the land, and we want to work side by side with our state affiliates, other groups, to bring new tools to the table for our producers.
Yep. Well, thanks for that overview of PORT, and I know we'll dive more into the details of its work and the work in Colorado too. But Lee, for yourself, let's talk about the Raptor 26 Ranch. Your work there. What goes on the operation, and what it's like ranching in your part of Colorado.
Well, we're a relatively small cow-calf operation. We grow hay. I'm a fifth-generation rancher. My great-great-grandfather started ranching in the panhandle of Texas in 1878, and my grandfather moved to Colorado in the early 30s. And his untimely death wound up having to get rid of that ranch, and my father bought the Raptor 26 2 weeks before I was born in 1962, and then I took over fully in Dad's death in 2018, and it's been a challenge, kind of a challenge. We live in a kind of it's turned into a resort area, lots of development pressure, and you know it's just a great place to live, but it also comes with challenges. And one of the reasons why I'm here is because we've done an easement on our place, and that has greatly helped us.
Yep. Well, the Raptor 26, you were born in 62. Do you have the Raptor 62 brand as well?
No, I don't. We had planned on the Raptor 62. my great-great-grandfather was 1878, and then and we were going to do Rafter 62, but Dad had the brands made, and he was buying heifers, and the brand board called and said, you can't have Rafter 62 because there's a /62 relatively close. So Dad said, well, we already have the brands made, or the irons made, and the guy from the brand board says, well, how about Rafter 26? And Dad says, I'll take it. So that's where we wound up with the brand. Yeah.
I knew there had to be a good story with
Yeah,
that. That's a good one there, Lee. So, Erik, I know we have folks listening here today, and in the last podcast that we discussed conservation easements, I think there's a lot of folks that have opinions on conservation easements, and I think today we can discuss the different types of easements that are out there, who's giving out easements, and I still kind of stand on the same grounds as a producer myself. I really don't have an opinion on easements. I haven't. I think my dad put one easement on some property years ago, but I think that's been sold, and so I really am in this conversation still really not having an opinion on easements. I hear conversations from supporters, from those that oppose them as well. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today and the work that's being done, especially from the agriculture end of it as well. So can you just walk us through what conservation easements are and what the main purpose is from your view, and then maybe that'll lead us into what sets the Colorado Land Trust separate from government type easements that are available for landowners?
Well, Lane, I think this is an important conversation because more and more producers are turning to conservation to look to find solutions to stay on the land. So one of the things we've identified within Port is that we need to have these conversations. So we're appreciative of the opportunity to be here and have this discussion today, and hopefully educate producers on how these work, eliminate some of the misperceptions that are around around conservation easements, and give them some tips on if they're considering this, what to look for, what to look out for. So I'll start with that, but you asked about what is an easement. And so really at its essence, an easement is a permanent set of deed restrictions that are placed voluntarily onto the property. Now, you could have, and you could imagine, you could have any number of restrictions that somebody could put into an easement. But if we're talking about producers, farm and ranch families, we want to design those easements in a way that works hand in hand with their operation. And we can do that. It may not always be perfect. It's really hard for a producer like Lee to be thinking about what it means to think into the future 50, 60, 70 years. What do I need? What are the people that are going to come after me going to need to run a successful agricultural operation? And so when we talk about easements, we want to put it in the context of durability. It should be thought of as a durability tool, meaning we're going to keep these properties in place so that they can continue to do what I think God intended for them to do. Raise food, give home to wildlife, and steward these great natural resources that we all depend upon. We need to keep places that can do those things, and it's becoming increasingly harder to do that. And so we turn to these tools like an easement that can help us do that. But again, we've got to be thinking about these, and what I encourage our producers to think about when they're looking at this is to think about it from a concept of durability, not from a concept of management. I really don't think, and Port's got pretty strong stance on management doesn't belong in an easement. Now, sometimes funders will want to get into that, but our job is to really continue to push. This is a tool around durability. It's not a tool around management. We can create other tools around management that can work in hand with that producer, but we need to be thinking about it in this context of let's keep these places there so that the next generation has this ability to come back and continue to carry on farm and ranch lifestyle.
So when we look at the easements that are available through members of Port there in Colorado, how are the parameters different, say, from a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service easement, from a state government easement program or other NGOs out there, what sets the ag trust-based approach to that? What are some of those key differences that are appealing to landowners that are multi-generational ranchers that kind of have a mistrust of especially government programs?
Sure. I think the main difference is mission. So all these organizations are going to have missions. And there are a lot of good conservation organizations out there that have conservation-focused missions. And those conservation-focused missions are fine, right? There certainly, in my opinion, should be organizations that work towards habitat protection and all that. That is what's great about our country. We have the freedom to explore those different things, and people have the freedom to be entrepreneurial and start organizations to do things they care about. But for ag producers, what we need is organizations that understand an ag operation and how to design these tools that work for an ag operation. And so the main difference you're going to see when working with a member of port versus a government agency or another land conservation organization is this focus on ensuring that the producer has the ability to continue production agriculture. Our mission is to continue to ensure that land's available for ag production, to grow our food, to grow our fiber into the future. And we know what comes from that actually is the great resource stewardship of our farm and ranch families across the country. We're going to get a whole bunch of other byproducts, side benefits that most conservation groups are looking for. So what Port and the members of Port, and there's 9 members of Port now operating in 12 states in the West and Midwest, are focused on and have been focused on since 2004 is flipping the idea of conservation. We want to put the person at the heart and at the center of it. If we can help that land steward do what they need to do to be operationally resilient and to be operationally sustainable, then we're going to have really good outcomes for food production. We're going to have really good outcomes for rural communities, and we're going to have really good outcomes for our conservation of our natural resources. And so you get these great win-win-win and multi-win benefits that come from this.
So when someone comes to you and participates, how do you walk them through the financial aspect of things, but also the legality of an easement as well?
So I think that for producers out there that are thinking about easements and considering an easement, there's a couple of things that they need to be thinking about. One is partner selection. I think that's the most important thing that a producer needs to be thinking about, because you're taking on a partner forever. And that partner should be able to provide you with confidence as a producer that they're going to be your partner forever. So you can imagine for Colorado Cattlemen's Ag Land Trust, my organization, when I sit down with somebody like Lee and start having this conversation, he's doing this for a couple reasons. One, he wants to carry on that Rafter 26 heritage. He wants to ensure that that land continues to do what it's always done, even in the face of all these immense pressures. But he wants to do it with somebody he trusts, right? And he knows that he can trust into the future. And I think what the brilliance of what Colorado Cattlemen's Association did in 1995 when they pioneered this was they said, we're going to give landowners confidence that their partner is always going to be first and foremost focused on agriculture and allowing that producer to do what they need to do. And they did that by saying a majority of your board is going to be made up of producers, and we're tying you to the Colorado Cattlemen's Association, which is the oldest livestock association in the country. And that since 1867, CCA has been that property rights advocate for our producers. Their values haven't changed in 150 plus years. We want that type of certainty for our producers. And so when we think about selection of a partner, you want to be thinking about that. And then we can, from that trust base, we can start talking about the legalities. We can start talking about the financial implications. But we've got to start with the premise of building that trust. And then from there, it's sitting down and walking them through, if you do this, this is what the financial outcomes are going to be. And there are a lot of them, and there are a lot of tax benefits. There's a lot of financial benefits. But there's also risks that you have to consider when doing these too. And so we have to think about that. And we have to, as an organization, be able to justify to Lee that we've got the financial resources that'll be there to be his partner and his heirs partner into the future as well. And so those conversations are really important. And those conversations should be the things that our producers, when they're sitting down and evaluating partners, even if it's an agency partner, those are the things I think they should be asking.
On the funding point, where does the funding come from?
So funding comes from a myriad of different places. There are tax benefits in every state for producers looking at easements. There's a federal tax deduction. Now, for most of our producers, having large federal income tax liabilities isn't really a reality, so that's not that great of a incentive around conservation. But in some states, there's tax credits. Like in Colorado, we have a transferable tax credit program, which is a great tool. And then there's several funders who will provide actual cash to these. USDA has several conservation easement programs that are built into the Farm Bill. Department of Interior will have conservation easement programs. Department of Defense actually has conservation easement programs. And so there's a myriad of these federal programs that producers can look at and enroll in, not indifferent from MEQIP or some of the others, but these are perpetual conservation easement programs. And then many of the states will have programs as well that will fund these. And then there's private funders that have an interest in conservation that will look at easements as a way to fund. And again, what I would tell producers is, and this is one of the misconceptions that's out there, is A, you're not obligated to take funding from anybody. B, your partner, conservation organization you're working with, should walk you through all of the challenges and benefits that may exist with those funding parameters that are going to come. Because if somebody's giving you money, they're going to want something in return, right? And so understanding what that program is and what the goals and objectives of that program are when you're looking at this, really important. And your organization you're working with should sit you down and walk you through all of those before they make a decision whether or not they're going to pursue funding for that easement using that funding source or not, because those funding sources should align with your values. And I think that's really important.
So, Lee, for yourself, obviously, urban encroachment definitely is an issue where your operation's at. Was that the key driver of why you started to explore this? I guess, what brought you to the table? What were some of the concerns you had with easements, and how did the process go?
Well, it's chiefly is financially driven. Actually, it's like there's an opportunity, especially in Colorado with the transferable tax credits, to where you could realize some actual money out of that. And we started looking in. It's like, well, is this working? My father kind of tasked me with doing the research on it, and so I went on Amazon and ordered every book that there was about conservation easements. I've read summaries of all the circuit courts of appeal if there's any problems with easements, and went through there and just did the research. And I recommend anybody who's doing this to do your homework and read, ask, and so when it came to the end, it's like, well, this seems like a good idea. And as Erik said, the biggest thing is that for a producer is to find someone that is aligned with your goals, and the Colorado Cattlemen's Ag Land Trust, and then as through extension of the members of Port, there's ranchers trying to help ranchers is basically how they're formed, and it's just they're and I always tell people that the kind of the unspoken motto of easements for CCALT is ranch like you want to, don't put up a development. And so there's a tremendous amount of freedom in what how the easement works for us, and the financial part just made it very attractive and made a lot of sense, and that changed our outlook and changed the way that we run the business. It's a tremendously freeing to be able to operate your ranch debt free. My father passed away in 2018, and he lived the last 10 years of his life without debt, and it was just amazing to see. It was just fun. It's fun to ranch. It's fun to do all these things because we weren't constantly looking at that note at the end of the year.
And can I ask what some of the criteria was for your easement on a particular part of land, and how that helps you manage that land then too?
It's interesting. The conservation easement is about a half-inch thick piece of document, and basically at the end it's like you can't put paved roads on there. You can't we can't put developments on there. But as Erik said, it's like looking into the future. We left a building envelope near our center pivot for a plant of somebody, and I have no idea what that plant would be for. But if in the future, if somebody was growing a crop there, they have an ability to put a building there and to do whatever it is. The conservation easement is a real challenge because you're always thinking, it's like, well, what would we might do, and what could the rancher's trying to build in as much freedom as possible. The land trust, especially the members of Port and CCLT, are just putting the kind of the fence around it where it's legally responsible, and it just, that's why it's so much easier to work with a rancher-based organization. I can honestly say there hasn't been a day where I've chafed under the restrictions of our easement. We did a lot of thought. We did a lot of preparation. When the land trust will give you a kind of a model easement, it's like, this is what we base our this is what we start off with. And so you go through there and it's like, I can live with that. I can't live with that. With this. And as you work through that document and you go, then you get a conservation lawyer, and you start talking with them. Is this right? Is this not? Can we do this? Can't we not? And it's very beneficial. And I recommend also to people is like, don't have don't have just any lawyer work through this. Have one who understands conservation law and conservation easements in your state, because they will keep you out of problems, and then they give you some good advice, and it has a very good, they can be a very good friend to you.
A question for both of you: what are some of the misconceptions that people have on easements that are easy to address in a conversation? What are some of those? Erik, I'll start with you there.
Well, I think the main one that we hear right now out there in the countryside is, well, if you do an easement and let's say you grow alfalfa, you got to grow alfalfa for the rest of time. You got to keep your fences where they are today. You could write an easement. You could absolutely write an easement that says those things. That's malpractice, in my opinion. And if you're working with an organization that's suggesting that, you got to run. There is no reason why you should have that kind of restrictions out there. We should, again, going back to this concept of durability, we have to have flexibility for Lee and for others to adjust and alter what they're doing with that operation into the future. What we do today is far different than what we were doing 50 years ago, and it'll be far different than what we will do in 50 years. And so we want to write easements in a way that give the landowners that flexibility to make those adjustments. And I would tell you that's probably two of the biggest misconceptions around easements that exist. And then there's all kinds of these theories that, who's funding these, what are their intentions. And certainly there are funders who we would encourage ag producers to not pursue funding from because they're not aligned with our goals. But there are tons of funders that understand this concept, that understand the importance of production agriculture, and want to work to find ways to ensure that our farm and ranch families continue to grow the food that we need into the future and keep our rural communities strong. And that's where we want to, and this is where this partnership comes in. We've got to help our producers align themselves with organizations and funders that have those shared goals and values.
And Lee, for yourself, what were some of the misconceptions that you had before you started researching the different easements that are out there and the different organizations, and that ultimately led you to the Colorado Land Trust?
There were several organizations that were kind of against conservation easements back in the earlier days, and we found, and I went through and just kind of started looking at the things that they were saying, and it's like, well, that's the people I knew involved with easements. Well, they're not trying to take over your ranch, and they're not going to turn over the deed to your ranch to the government. So I went through just a lot of those things, and you hear even to this day, there's people out there who don't want you to do easements on their land, and it's like they don't really necessarily have your interests at heart. And the organization back in the early part, they were funded by realtors, and it was a lot easier to sell ranches in 2 acres lots than it was in a whole ranch. And so you kind of had to start looking at people's motives on why they did that. There was other things that people said, that you couldn't get a loan on your land, you couldn't sell your land, and all these different things, and all those turned out to be just patently false. And it seemed like everything that people would come up with is like that didn't want you to do an easement on your land. It was just kind of, they had more, it's like they didn't want you to exercise your own private property rights, and that kind of bothered me. So when we found the Cattlemen's Ag Land Trust, well, it was just a fit. My dad became a member of Colorado Cattlemen's in 1962, and he signed it as W.F. Rooks and Sons. So technically, I've been a member my whole life, and Cattlemen's, the outstanding thing is there's always going to be ranchers on the board. It's always going to be ag focused, and so. It's just a natural, normal fit, and I'm very proud that we have an easement with them.
So, Lee, what's the makeup of the ranch today? Do you have kids or family that are involved with you on the day-to-day operations, or you hope to?
Well, unfortunately, my wife and I don't have kids, and that's one of the things that we really thought about with this easement. At some point, our ranch somebody else is going to be running our ranch, and it's not necessarily exactly what you want, but that's the way it is. The wonderful thing, and it's a tremendous gift from having this easement, is this land that I love is never going to be torn up. It's not going to have it's not going to be split up. Years ago, there was a realtor came by, and he was wanting to work a deal with my folks, and he spread out this big giant plot map, and it was our ranch, and it had all these roads and the whole place cut up into lots, and it just made me sick to my stomach, and I could not see how we could lose this place, and it was during a real tough time for my folks financially, and thankfully we were able to get through that time, and then just kind of a gift from God to have an easement, and then that set us up to where that's not a problem in that place, regardless of who is there, will always be a ranch.
And when you think about that next generation too, how important is it for the children or the family members that are removed from that land? Maybe they grew up there, maybe they didn't, but they haven't spent any time in production ag, so it's just an asset that they may inherit or get a part of the process. What is some words of advice you have to them, maybe exploring options like an easement, or just ensuring that this land can stay in ag and not get developed?
Yeah, it's we spent a lot of time looking through that and thinking about that. It's if I don't see how there's very many people who is like you spend your life on that land and working with, it's like someday I'm going to get that dry spot in the meadow, and you just work and over there is where, my favorite cow was born and all this stuff. And then to think about that just being split up and a road there. And if you love that place and you love that land, it's just a tremendous ability to know it's like this ranch is going to stay there and that land is there. When in 2008 we signed we did 2 easements on our property, and we signed the first one, and I drove my father down to the signing, and we were on the way home, and my dad was quiet, and we were driving along, and I was kind of thinking, oh gosh, I hope he's all right, and he said, in a quiet voice, and he says, this old ranch has been awfully good to us, and I'm so thankful that we can do something nice for her, and it's stuck with me ever since. It's that ranch is a part of our family and a part of our souls, and even when we're gone, it's not going to be torn up.
So, Erik, how many acres have been that you've worked with the CCALT over the years? How many acres are under easements there now?
So we talk a lot about. Do we talk about acres or we talk about families served?
Yeah.
And we have to talk about both, right? For a number of reasons. But what makes me so proud is that we've worked with over 450 families across Colorado to help them. And this really is them doing this. We're just a facilitator. They have the vision. They have the goals. We have helped those 450 families conserve more than 830,000 acres. That's bigger than the state of Rhode Island. And so when I hear people talk about producers not caring about the environment, not caring about conservation, I just shake my head because I see it every single day. Every single landowner we work with is so passionate about their land and what they're doing. And the reason that they're looking at conservation is because they want to give that opportunity for other future generations to care and have that same passion. And it is emotional, right? I think we all need to get emotional about those things and about the unbelievable work that our families are doing out there. The Partnership of Rangeland Trusts are 9 member organizations. We've worked with over 2,100 families. Those families have conserved over 3.2 million acres of working agricultural land. And society and everybody else needs to stand up and applaud because we all benefit from it. But what's even better is that they get to keep doing the things they want to do, and that next generation is going to have those opportunities too.
Mm-hmm. And Lee, from your perspective, how big of a development could be placed on the land that makes up your ranch? How many buildings or multi-tiered apartment buildings could have a developer put on that land?
In our county they had a 2-acre zoning, and so there'd be 1,800 or so, and on the deeded portion, and that's just a sickening amount, and to think about.
What's what I always talk about at home there. I went to college at Montana State University in Bozeman, and every time you drive down there, the best topsoil in the state of Montana is being built on. And then when you get north of town, there's still ranches, and the trusts that are around there have done a very good job of making sure that family producers can stay in business. And as we look towards options for producers, what are some what's a plan that people should follow if they're considering? What are some key things that people should step up? Obviously, Lee, you did a lot of homework yourself for your family, but what are some of the key simple things people should be asking themselves and seeking if they're looking for this? Because like you said, it could be either financial driven, maybe encroachment protection, or expansion opportunities too. That kind of maybe is the three rungs that. Maybe that's my view of it, I guess, and you can tell me I'm completely wrong on that. But what are some of the key first steps people should consider? And are easements for everybody? That's another question I have for you too.
Well, the simple thing, or I'll ask you the second question first. In my opinion, it's like easements aren't for everybody, and I don't push people to do an easement. But if the easement is right for them, it's an amazing tool, and it's a freeing tool. And you need to do your homework and not listen to somebody on the radio who says they're bad. You need to do your own research and do and check into them yourself. So that's one of the things. I think that I would encourage people to take a step-by-step approach. If you're interested in do that, start talking to someone who has an easement. Start talking and talk to your if you're in a port member state, then talk to the Cattlemen's Land Trust and see what they have, see what an easement looks like, see what they want you to do, and you just start taking it one step at a time. It's a long process, but it's very financially rewarding by doing that. One of the things that I recommend also is that when you get an easement, is that you read it paragraph by paragraph and understand that paragraph before you go on to the next one, and that will allow all the ranchers and the families to go, yep, I can live with this. This is great. And if there's a problem, will you talk with your lawyer and say, how can we get past this? It may work out that it's not for you, but you know that well before you sign a paper. There was some ranchers from the Big Hole country in Montana that came and talked to our cattlemen's group, and they said an easement is kind of like buying a horse. You really need to do your research, and you need to spend your time. And when you do, you can wind up with a great fit. And I really recommend that people will do that and take it step by step. It's very rewarding if it's the right fit for you.
Erik, I know it was a long question, 2 questions put together, but your thoughts on that rambling question?
Well, it's a good question. I think it's a critical question, and I agree with Lee. They're not for everybody, and I think, again, that's one of these misperceptions out there. If you listen to some folks, they would make you seem like, you got these groups coming out there and just forcing producers to do easements. These are always voluntary. And to Lee's point, I think he made a really good suggestion, which is pick up the phone, call somebody. Ag is a big community, but it's also a really small community, especially when we start talking about NCBA and our state affiliates. We all know producers that either in our state or somewhere else that have done this, and pick up the phone, call them. Ask them what the experience like, ask them what they would have done differently. What are the suggestions that they have for how to evaluate this and work through it. And then the other thing I would say is producers need to understand that these easements, there's not a set in stone way you write them. You can negotiate the terms of these easements. And so if a land trust comes, and they will, because we all have template form easements, because it just increases efficiency. But that doesn't mean you can't go into any of those provisions and say, well, I don't like this. What does this mean? We need to change it. And you can make modifications to a lot of those. Now, there's some, granted, that from a legal perspective that you can't really change, but that has more to do with our tax code than it does with anything else. And that's one of these areas where port and others, and working side by side with NCBA and other groups, need to be looking at reforms to some of these statutory provisions so that they can work better for ag producers over the long run. And that's that's a big component of what, from the port perspective, when I talk about the policy work we're doing and the innovation work, it's how do we make these things work better for ag producers? Because we can make changes. Is it easy? No, but good things in life are rarely easy. So you just put your head down and you work towards it, make it better so that we can keep people like Lee, on the land, but also just give them options. So if an easement works for them, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. I've told producers, every time I sit down with the producer, I'm like, if this works for you, we're here to help. If it doesn't, that's okay too. And if we can help you look at other resources, we're happy to do that. We see ourselves as an organization, as a conservation service provider to the members of CCA first and foremost, and then beyond that, all ag producers in the state of Colorado.
How does CCLT help tell producers and landowners' story, whether that's aiding CCA in their endeavors? Because in Colorado in particular, it's quite the landscape down there politically. What, how are you helping them tell the story and tell Lee's story and highlight all the work that's going on? And what are some of the ways that you reach out to the public as well?
Yeah, so I think what's unique about what CCA did back in 1995 in creation of Colorado Cattlemen's Ag Land Trust, and then other states have followed suit, is you've created a conservation organization rooted in agriculture. And so we have this enormous reach into areas within the state and within the people of the state that the cattle associations and livestock associations don't always get to touch. Mm-hmm. And so what we really want to do, again, is work side by side with CCA to be able to tell that story. When we have a bad ballot measure, and Colorado's got this, notorious history of bad ballot measures that are anti-agriculture, we want to stand there side by side with CCA and with others in the ag industry and find ways to ensure that those bad ballot measures don't become law. And if we can find ways to reach portions of the community that your typical NCBA affiliate can't, that's what we want to try to do, and tell this story in a different way. Tell it from a conservation lens. Beyond that, and Lee was actually in a video last year that we produced that's talking about what this means to the 5 families that were featured in that video. And the whole idea about that is to get this out and humanize it to the public, because we have to change hearts and minds. And we've got great stories. We've got great storytellers. Sometimes it's hard to get them to tell their story, but we push, in a respectful way to get them to do that, because we do think that's the best way to counter some of this anti-ag sentiment that exists out there. Yep.
What is it like getting out of your comfort zone there?
Well, I spoke once, and our Senator Bennett was in the audience, and it was a strange deal because I spend most of my time speaking with a border collie, and then the next thing was talking with the senator. So it is out of our comfort zone, but there's no one else that tells our story, and I appreciate just the efforts of CCA, of Colorado Cattlemen Association, NCBA, and all the things that are done for us. But it's also, as us ranchers have to start getting out and saying, this is important. This is why. This is why it's important. And I've had so many times people, I didn't understand. And I've been just so thankful for also for CCLT. And it's just a tremendous working partnership, but there's also support. And when you go in there and CCLT is able to go to rabid environmental groups and say, doing this project is really bad for agriculture, and if it's really bad for agriculture, it's very bad for conservation. And we're able to, and CCLT is able to get into places and talk to people that would never talk to a rancher in their life. And so they've done tremendous outreach and made tremendous progress for us, especially in a state like Colorado, where the political scheme is a little bit different. So it's been a tremendous tool, just even those backroom, those meetings that they're in and say, this is why that's bad. And it's been very fortunate for that.
Final comments on conservation easements, thoughts. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
I want to. There's lots of people who have said things negatively about conservation easements. Really encourage people to check it out for yourself. Don't listen to what people say at a meeting or on the radio or whatever, but check it out for yourself. And if it's a good fit for you, it's one of the best things that you'll ever do for your ranch, for your family, and for agriculture. The old saying is that they're not making any more land, and it's like we're losing ranch land at amazing amount, and it's terrifying. Where's the food going to come from in 50 years? And so we're doing our part to make sure that there's a place for cows to grow.
Erik?
I'd say, Lane, if producers are exploring this, port and its members are a resource, even if you're not in a state that has a port organization, and we're still a resource for you. We are working closely with NCBA's team on some educational materials for producers to make sure that they have resources that they can turn to. Fortunately, I think now you don't have to do the level of research that Lee may have had to have done when he was looking at it. We've got people that have consolidated that type of information into places where producers can more easily find it. More producers have done easements, and so you can talk to them and understand what it's like to live with an easement and work in that partnership. And those things are really important. So use us as a resource. I'd also say, states that don't have a port-affiliated land trust, or the NCBA affiliate in those states haven't explored this, I'd encourage them to look, because more and more producers are saying this is a tool we want to look at, and we need to give them organizations that understand what they're trying to accomplish with their operation. We need more ag-focused organizations to help those producers carry this forward. And then the last thing I would say is that we view our relationship with our 450 plus landowners as this really dynamic partnership. And so Texas Ag Land Trust, Colorado Cattlemen's Ag Land Trust, California Rangeland Trust been working on these new models we call additive conservation. How do we come in and help our producers, our landowning families, do more, get access to more tools so that they can continue to do the things they want to do? And that's what gets me most excited, is how can we provide more tools to Lee and our other landowners for them to be able to continue these really dynamic agricultural operations into the future.
Well, again, I think we've had a very enlightening conversation here today, and I thank you for your time. How long do you think we've been talking, Lee?
I don't know, 20, 30 minutes.
We're at 49 on the recording.
Well,
probably a little shorter when I cut out my mess-ups there at the beginning, but I want to thank you both for taking time and sharing your perspectives on things and discussing these conservation easements and your operations and organizations. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to tell people how to give our story. I appreciate that greatly.
Thanks, Lane.
With that, friends, thanks for joining us here on the Cattlemen's Call podcast. I'm Lee Nordlund. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to NCBA's Cattlemen's Call podcast with Lane Nordlund. For more information, visit ncba.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast today.